Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, here to support you in overcoming disordered eating and finding peace with food. So thank you so much for listening today. Now today I want to talk all about extreme hunger, going all in, and am I just binge eating? Okay, because I think this is something, I don't know if I've really talked about this topic much on the podcast before. And I know it's something many of my clients are struggling with, and thought it would be a great topic to really dive into a bit more and to pick out some of the nuances in it, because I think there's a real trend at the moment to go all in recovery, and I think for some people that works really, really well, but I don't think it is the one way to recovery, and I don't think it's always suitable for everyone. For sometimes it can just feel too much too soon and be too overwhelming, but there are many roads to recovery. So let's dive in. So extreme hunger. In eating disorder recovery, going through extreme hunger is often a terrifying but essential part of the healing process. Now, you can experience extreme hunger with any eating disorder, or as well if you have disordered eating behavior. But the ferocity and intensity of the hunger will usually be correlated with your previous level and duration of restriction. Extreme hunger often occurs in recovery once you begin to eat more following a period of starving. So what tends to happen is, once you start to eat a bit more, the hunger really kicks in. It can feel like it almost comes from nowhere. And it's a phenomenon that every eating disorder sufferer would rather avoid like the plague. And it's the complete antithesis of control and safety that the ED promises. Now, extreme hunger can feel catastrophic and overwhelming, but it's a healthy, indicative sign that your body is on the mend. Your body is waking up and healing. Now, if you're restricting food and not experiencing extreme hunger, then you're probably not eating enough yet to have kick-started this process. Now, often people will describe, particularly when they've been restricting for a long time, it's almost like all hunger signals are shut off. You might know sometimes that you need to eat. You'll get those starvation syndrome effects, like feeling really, really cold. You might still feel preoccupied with food. You might not be able to concentrate. All those kind of symptoms that come from under eating, but you may not always feel hungry per se. But that probably means that you haven't started eating enough yet to have kick-started the process. Extreme hunger impacts people of all body shapes and sizes, not just those who are emaciated. I think, again, that's really, really important to stress. And not everyone in recovery experiences the intense hunger, although most do. And it will vary from weeks to significantly longer in length in terms of how long you experience it. And it may depend on the extent of your previous restriction in understanding its intensity. But it seems to be really widely variable between different individuals. So I think this is what people struggle with a lot in the process, of just that uncertainty and not knowing. So there are no hard and fast rules, which makes the unpredictability of the process even more frightening. So you might feel like you can't stop eating. In extreme hunger, you will desire to eat humongous amounts of food. And you'll be eating significantly more than those around you, and you'll feel like a monster with an uncontrollable appetite, and you will think that your metabolism is broken. You will fear that you will eat and never stop. You will fear that your weight will elevate to catastrophic proportions, and you'll be terrified that everyone will judge you and you'll be alienated from your friends and family. These are all very typical thoughts. You are not alone. Now, extreme hunger includes physical and mental hunger. So physical hunger might include things like a gnawing, stomach rumbling, a preoccupation with food, low energy, and an irritable, hangry urge to eat. And mental hunger, where you're thinking about food and desiring a particular taste or pleasure. You might even be physically full to the brim, but you're still preoccupied and wanting food. But mental hunger is equally valid. If you've been restricting your food intake for a long period of time, the body's deficit of calories is astronomically huge, and the body will be requesting more food to establish balance and homeostasis. And the body is built for survival and will be wanting to establish its set point and happy place. So it's completely natural to desire all the foods that you haven't been allowing yourself, and it's completely natural to desire vast quantities of food too. Okay, this is all normal. So let's dive into some frequently asked questions about extreme hunger. So people often ask, should I go all in and respond to every hunger request? Now, I think there is not a right or a wrong way to do recovery. It's very individual. Some people dive all in and will literally go with their physical and mental hunger with 100% commitment. Now, this complete surrender is both terrifying and exhilarating. And to get to this point, you may have become so exhausted by the eating disorder that letting go feels like the one appealing option. Because holding on so tightly to the ED feels miserable and soul destroying, and you wholeheartedly just surrender. You just think, I just can't do this anymore, I'm going to do it. Now, others as well find themselves going all in without planning to do so. It sort of fall into it. Now, I personally experienced this as once I started eating, I just couldn't go back to the rigid restriction. Those floodgates were open. I kept trying, but I could not go back to it once I started eating. The hunger was so intense. As once you start eating more, it's challenging to fight the hunger drive, and conceding is sometimes the only way. So in contrast, others cling tightly to a meal plan in recovery with allotted food amounts. This often happens perhaps more in hospital, or even I think in a lot of NHS UK eating disorder services. Now I think as well with a meal plan, it can be quite painfully difficult to adhere to it when body signals are demanding more food. But still, the safety of a meal plan offers some sense of security and steadiness in the process, and this can be mentally stabilizing and immensely valuable. Now, personally, I'm wholeheartedly behind honouring hunger 100%, as this is the path to full recovery and freedom. However, I also believe in creating safety in the process. I think that is really, really important. So how to create a sense of safety? So it includes having a strong baseline of regular eating and stabilising blood sugar in the background with 3 meals and 3 snacks per day. And this is a scaffolding of self-care. So it includes as well incrementally introducing a variety of foods with care and planning. It includes managing thoughts and developing techniques for self-support. It includes self-talk and visualization. And it includes planning meals, mindful eating, and distraction too. Now, I've done a recent podcast and Substack writing episode on all of this, which talks about how to reintroduce your forbidden foods without binging. So you can scroll back a few posts or episodes and you'll be able to see that, where I go into a lot more detail about how to create the sense of safety. Now, in my own recovery, I didn't have these necessary tools, and I literally ate chocolate, donuts and sugary edibles for 2 months solid whilst feeling wildly out of control. I gained a lot of weight very quickly. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with these foods per se, but it made the whole process immensely psychologically stressful. Now, if I'd understood about self-caring eating, I could have reduced my distress significantly. Now, I probably still would have eaten a ton of sugar and that would have been fine, but I would have also had that scaffolding safety balance in the background. And then what happened with me is I fell into bulimia after having anorexia, as I started to compensate for the extremely hungry eating episodes, which then perpetuated a toxic cycle of restriction, binging and purging. And this was avoidable if I'd known what I know now. So for some, all in is liberation and the path to freedom. For others, you will need some safety and structure in the process. And it will still be catastrophically messy and imperfect despite the structure. You're not going to stick perfectly to a meal plan. It just won't happen. And you will still eat more than you think that your body needs, but it will need the food. And if you have issues with emotional regulation, self-worth, critical thinking, all in can feel like a volcanic explosion blasting you uncontrollably in all directions. So if you do all in and you've got quite a lot of other issues going on with your mental health, you may be at risk of recoiling the food freedom with ferocious rigidity and relapsing back to the old safe cage of control. So if you're standing on the edge of the recovery cliff and contemplating options, you may wish to reflect on which path suits you better. All in or incremental steps, or you might even do a bit of a mix of the two. Now, doing the stepped route still takes you to the same end goal, but at a slower pace, and the goal of both approaches is food freedom and peace. Okay, next question. Why do I need to eat more than others around me in recovery and when I'm dealing with extreme hunger? So in recovery, you will need to eat significantly more than others around you. This is normal, but also an extremely uncomfortable part of the process. And you'll have to constantly remember that others are not recovering from an eating disorder. This is why they will be eating less. And you will need to boldly put the blinkers on to comparisons and stay in your own lane. And you have permission to honour your hunger and to eat. Encourage others in your life not to comment, but to support you on your journey. And really important this, I think, because I think other people as well sometimes just don't understand about eating disorders and they don't understand about extreme hunger. So if you can get people in your life not to comment and just to really support you is massively helpful. Okay, next question. Am I at risk of developing binge eating disorder or bulimia? Now, extreme hunger can be overwhelmingly scary. It can feel like binge eating. Rather, it is appropriate feasting after the famine. And because it feels like binge eating, you might be tempted to restrict or compensate after hungry episodes. Now, compensation means starving, over-exercising, or purging. Now, I was stuck in this place for several years. I didn't understand that my extreme hunger, I thought it was binge eating, so I'd always try to rectify the situation and developed full-on bulimia. Because the restriction perpetuated the hunger, which perpetuated the purging, and back to restriction. Again, it was a relentless cycle. So I only moved out of this when I genuinely stopped the restriction and allowed myself to eat the foods that I deeply desired and in reasonable quantities. And I only moved out of this when I allowed my weight to stabilise at its set point. For several years, I was underweight, but socially acceptably so, and this kept me stuck in restriction and extreme hunger. So I mistakenly thought I was recovered, but in fact it was quasi-recovery. I was still under eating. So many people get stuck here because their BMI is supposedly within the healthy range. Now, BMI, body mass index, is a limiting measure, and not every single body is going to be at their happy weight at BMI 20 or even 18.5 as the NHS chart deems as healthy. Now, think about this. How many adults do you genuinely know that have a BMI of 18.5 without under eating? Yeah, I think it's quite rare, isn't it? It's usually probably teenagers or if someone has an extremely small frame. That is not very typical. So BMI ranges are not massively helpful. So if you are thinking, okay, my BMI is 18.5, so I am healthy, is a very good chance that you're probably not. You're probably in quasi-recovery and you're doing way better than you were before, but you're still restricting, which is going to continue with all the food noise and preoccupation with food. So forget BMI and listen to your own body. Your body knows where its set point is, and when you stabilise here, I promise you that you will no longer be deeply obsessed with food 24/7. Next question, what about emotional triggers for overeating and other stuff? Now, eating disorder recovery encompasses more than weight gain and adequate nutrition. Yes, these are vital parts of the process, but focusing on these alone may leave you stuck with rock bottom self-worth, emotional dysregulation, and a raging inner critic. Focusing only on the food and weight side, it may lead you to a quasi-recovered place where you look normal and healthy, but in fact, and I'm putting normal in air quotes, but in fact you are struggling mentally more than ever before. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the worst places to be, because everyone thinks you're well, you're fine, you're recovered, but you feel lonely, you feel misunderstood, and the food noise still rages. So as your weight approaches its set point range, the extreme hunger will decrease in intensity, although this will be prolonged if you continue to restrict. So work towards abolishment of restriction and or compensatory behaviours. Get support if you need it. And then you can also begin to work on those deeper issues. You can explore why you developed an eating disorder, weaving together the childhood influences, trigger points and core beliefs, and you can begin to construct your own psychological formulation and to bring the different parts of the jigsaw together. And I've also got a podcast episode and also a Substack article on psychological formulation if you want to know more about this. So you might well need to seek support from a therapist or a coach to cross this recovery bridge, but it's a worthwhile investment in traversing from quasi-recovery to full food freedom. Sorry, I cannot get my words out. Doing the deeper work will also protect you from shifting from one eating disorder to another, or simply transferring your coping strategy to something else like drugs or alcohol. So, in summary, it can be hugely challenging to navigate the extreme hunger symptom, but it is an essential component of eating disorder healing for most. The way out is through, and you will find freedom on the other side. Be brave, keep going, and lean into the approach that feels best for you. Just because everyone's going all in, it doesn't mean that you have to go all in yourself. Yes, I'm still advocating the end goal. If you do it more incrementally, you still want to be working to an end goal of complete food freedom, but there are different ways of doing it, if all in is just too overwhelming for you. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're not following me already on Instagram, do seek me out, the Eating Disorder Therapist _ for further support with your relationship with food. Do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. And if you want to receive written articles of the podcast, please subscribe to my Substack. The link is in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.